Hey guys, it's me back once again for another movie review, and for tonight's review, I'm going to be talking about a film that I really enjoyed. It really painted a certain portrait on an event that a lot of people don't enjoy talking about. But the movie is basically inspired by an event that I've always been really interested in. When it first happened back when I was really young in school, I remember it happening, but I didn't know exactly how big it was. I didn't realize the impact that it would leave on history and on society after that. I just figured it was just another tragedy. But the event that I'm talking about is the Columbine High School Massacre, and as everybody knows, that is one of the worst, shootings in school shootings in history. And of course it has left a really big impact on pretty much everybody that, either has heard about it or, was victim of it or however. And basically after the Columbine happened, there were several movies made after it, as a way of being that was inspired by it, such as the film Duck, the Columbine High Massacre, which I've seen, and I'm not a big fan of that film. Then there's the movie Elephant by Gus Van Sant. Now that one is actually a pretty good film. I really enjoyed it, but out of all the ones that I've seen, I actually enjoyed this one the most. And that movie is called Zero Day. And basically what Zero Day is these two friends, Andre and Calvin, who plan to shoot up their school. One thing that makes this movie a bit different from the other films based on Columbine is it's actually a found footage home movie type film. Now I know that found footage movies are so overrated now to, with Paranormal Activity, and there's so many found footage films out now. But this movie actually came out in 2003, which, before that, really the only major movie that was like a found footage film was the Blair Witch Project. So at that point, found footage films were still kind of new. Basically the film is actually based on the Basement tapes that Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold recorded, basically talking about how they were going to shoot up the school of Columbine, how they were going to do everything, how they kept, the guns hidden from their parents, and how they kept the bombs that they had hidden from their parents. And it's basically just that. The movie starts off kind of comical. You see the two characters are driving in a car, and they set up a camera right in front of their school. And they have like a salute, like an army salute, and they're talking about, hey, my name is Andre Kreeman. One of the main guys is Andre, who's got this, he's kind of a tall guy, black hair, and another guy is kind of a short guy with short blonde hair named Calvin, and they call themselves the Army of Two, and basically they're telling about their plans on shooting up the school. And from that point on is when the movie is basically just chronicling them going into it. The movie is kind of cool because it starts off as them talking about, oh, we're about to go shoot up our school, and in the next scene it'll show something like it shows Andre's birthday, and his parents are talking to him, and they bought him a camera, and so of course he says, oh, hey, thanks for bringing us a camera, but in reality he really didn't like it. Then they go to a party. You're introduced to Andre's cousin, and you find out that he shoots. So they ask him, hey, can we shoot, with you one time? And that, of course, explains one way that they get the guns. But that's one thing I really liked about it. It showed them, talking about wanting to shoot up the school. But the way that they did it was, the movie is so realistic, where they're never shown as monsters. They're not sitting there like, we hate this fucking school, we're going to blow everything up, we're going to kill everybody one of y'all. No, it's not like that. They actually talk about shooting up the school like it's just a normal thing, Hey man, we're gonna go, we're gonna get some guns, it's gonna be fun, we're gonna go to the stores and buy stuff, and then we're gonna shoot up the school. And to me, that made the movie look so much more realistic, because it doesn't paint the two kids as killers, and they're both they're about, I think, 17, 18 maybe in this movie. And it doesn't paint them as killers, it paints them as human beings and teenage kids that were bullied, And I like that whole contrast of first it shows them talking about wanting to shoot up their school, then it shows them just hanging out with hanging out at their parents' house eating or whatever, and that's also cool. There's also a scene where you see Andre, and it's like he's having his home, like his own home TV show, and he's talking about guns that his dad has. Like, hi, I'm Andre, and welcome to another episode of our home gun show. And it shows him going in and stealing guns out of his dad's closet, and he basically shows you how you can make a gun more concealable. And that is he gets he orders a stock, and then he modifies it to make it smaller, which is actually against the law. You know, you're not allowed to do that. But you know, it shows him doing that. Another thing is that the way that they talk about it is really different from everyone else. At one point, Andre actually mentions saying that they didn't have any sources laying around. Like, they didn't have a website laying around with a list of people that they wanted to kill or anything like that. They didn't have any notes or whatever about it laying around. So pretty much no one saw this coming, which I honestly think is a bit of it's a reference to Columbine, because one of the killers, Eric Harris, actually had a website up. And he actually said on his website that he was making pipe bombs, and that he also had a list of all the people he wanted to kill, which to me should have been a giveaway. I'm not going to get too far into actual Columbine right now. I'm just trying to talk about the movie, because if I get into a whole Columbine thing, then it'll get a little bit out of hand, because there's a lot of things that, there was a lot of times in which Columbine could have been prevented, and it wasn't, which, But anyway, basically back to the movie, he does that, which I think is a really good realistic thing, because if you were to do this, you wouldn't want to have a website, of a list of people that you want to kill. So I guess it's smart on their part for not doing that. But like I said, it goes on and on. There's another scene where you see Calvin, and he's walking with his girlfriend, and they're walking in a graveyard, and she's talking about the guy Andre, and she doesn't like him. She thinks she's a bad influence on Calvin, which, if I had to compare the two, I'd say Andre was the Eric Harris for Columbine, and Calvin was the Dylan Klebold of Columbine. Because from what I've heard, Eric already had something up with him to begin with. They both had something up with him, but in a way, Eric was more into killing people, whereas Dylan just wanted to be loved and wanted wanted people to know his name. And that's why I think Calvin represents him in a way, because after you see a couple of videos that they shot themselves, then you see Calvin sitting by himself, and he finds out that he's doing these own video diaries by himself, and he's talking about how that 0 day is going to be like, he's going to live like 100 years in a day, and of how that, he even says in his video that he wants to make a mark on the world, and he wants people to remember him forever. And, there's different scenes. It's just him sitting there with the camera, and there's something about it that's just, it's so spooky and realistic, because I can literally see kids doing this. He does that a few times. There's even one point where he says that he builds up his hatred for the school, and Andre did, and then when they met at this point, and then it went from there, and then things start happening. They talk about building pipe bombs in their house, different things to do with it. They don't actually tell you how you build them, because I'm sure if you did, I'm sure if they put that in the movie, then I'm sure a lot of people would probably try to do that themselves at home. So there's no scene of them actually building them, but there's them talking about, oh, if you're going to buy all the stuff, make sure you get one item from each store. If you keep going out to different stores and buying the same thing, then people are going to think, But, there's that. There's also a scene which is kind of weird where Calvin makes Andre drive him to like a poetry reading, and Calvin gets up and has this, poem about guns and stuff like that, and Andre gets all pissed off at him. He's like, why would you do that? People are going to think things. And that's what made it realistic to me, because they just acted like they were normal teenagers, they acted like they were kids. And even in the movie, there's also a scene where, there's a scene of Calvin, and he's at a get-together with his family, and there's really nothing related to 0 Day in that video, but that establishes what he was like outside of, what was he like when he wasn't hanging out with Andre, and what he acted like when he was. Neither one of them really act evil or extremely mad. Some of the stuff they do is playful. Like at the beginning of the movie, they don't really like this guy who's like the the head, I think a quarterback for the football team, and he's like a star to school. And so what they do is that they get a bunch of eggs and they egg his house. And, they call it the first, their first step on war against everything, which I thought was kind of funny because you can actually see people doing that, but it, of course, escalates into, escalates. But like I said, very realistic. This is one of those movies where you're watching like, wow, this really looks real. Even I was watching it I watched, some people talk about it on YouTube, and they actually thought that it was actual real footage of it. There's even people that have taken like I'm not going to talk about the last scene in the movie, but if you know about Columbine, you pretty much know how it's going to end. And some people have taken just footage from the last scene of the movie and put it online and said that it was actual Columbine footage, which it wasn't. Probably my favorite scene next to them. The whole movie is really enjoyable because you actually care about these characters. The two guys are pretty likable. They really look like, guys you'd see, in high school or whatever. And that's what makes it so realistic, because they're just normal kids. They're normal kids that you'd walk into school and talk to every day. Hey, what's up, dude? How you doing? When meanwhile, they're planting bombs and planning on shooting up the school. And that's one thing that I found very realistic about the movie, is because it can happen anywhere. And it can. And we see that it can happen again. And that's one portrait I think that the movie betrays them, is that stuff like Columbine or the Virginia Tech shooting, it can happen anytime, any place. And that's one thing that's spooky about it, is that it could happen, or it may happen, or it is happening. And that's one thing that drives them home. Also, I like how that none of the characters are viewed as villains. They're not viewed as killers, like most documentaries I've seen. Like every time I see a documentary, they always talk about the Columbine killers. They're never viewed as killers in this entire movie. They're viewed as likable human beings, which is, I think, the only way you can look at it that way. Same thing with Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. Most people look at them as killers, but at the same time, you got to know that something happened to them that made them killers, and that's why I'm interested in Columbine, because I want to know why they did it. Same thing with Charles Manson or serial killers. I want to know what made them a serial killer. And I think in a way this movie really painted a picture, because it just looked like a bunch of kids got some video, two kids got a video camera and was like, alright, we're going to shoot up a school. And it's really a cool, realistic movie, and I definitely recommend checking out Zero Day. It's available on Amazon. It's one of those Amazon burn-on-demands, but I'll leave a link down below where you can order the film. If Columbine interests you in any possible way, be it you just want to know more about it or whatever, and if you want to see a movie that betrays it in a sort of way, the movie's not about Columbine, but it's about what would happen if two kids went and did it to their school. Then that's what it's about. I'd recommend this one and Gus Van Sant's Elephant. Those are probably the two movies that I would say are the two best ones that are based on the Columbine Massacre and are very interesting to watch. Whereas Elephant is sort of slow and it takes you a long time to get into things. Zero Day is it's not really slow, but it does have a long build-up, but you get to know about the characters, you get to like the characters, and then at the very end, when it finally does happen, you're even more shocked. You're like, wow, I actually liked these characters. They seem like, alright, they seem like pretty normal kids, where at the same time, they're sitting there, we're going to blow up our school, and stuff like that, and that's what I think is the big mind game of the whole movie. So if it sounds interesting, I highly recommend you check out Zero Day. It's a really great executed film, great acting, great just everything about it. The only thing I didn't like about it was the opening and ending, because it had sort of a song that took away from the found footage type thing. But that's just minor things. Those are just the opening and end credits. But anyway, guys, if Zero Day sounds interesting, I highly recommend checking it out. And so thanks for watching. Thanks to everybody for subscribing, and I'll see you guys later.